If we are to look at concentration and cultivating of concentration, I mean, you've worked with me for a while. You've known that my preference is towards the breath, just because there's a progression to it. It's just like we can have like the simple contact with breath and noticing the different qualities at the different stages of breath, how that can move into the wider body. And I guess I fall upon the four foundations of mindfulness system there via the Anapanasati train. So there's this progression to it. There's something that I like about that. Breath counting is definitely a tool for focusing and cultivating concentration. The drawback is with it is that there's no progression to it. It's just you can just kind of stay in that locked system for a long time, and then potentially form a dependency on that. And there's no kind of outlet. There's no kind of out. Oh, and then that moves into another. It's not a gradual progression. So I'm not saying that it's a pernicious trap to fall into, that you'll be counting forever.
Please no.
That's right. We don't want this to lead into some OCD territory or something. No, it won't do that. But I do know people who have chosen the counting route, and it's just, I guess, well, that's where they are, and they just kind of stay there. So I always favor something that's a progressive method, so that like more the concentration settles into an aspect of it, the next kind of thing underneath that becomes revealed. And then the more that becomes the object of focus, then you can kind of, that becomes the subject, then you become aware of something else that becomes the object, so to speak. Or vice versa, then you can look at that which you perceive as subject, and then that becomes the object. Now then, you said that the insight component is going rather well.
Yeah, the insight, I am able to increasingly just kind of fine tune, my sensory clarity. I'm definitely finding that that's really nice. And when I do count, I do let that go. I don't go on with it for the entire practice. It's just something when I'm like, oh, I can't concentrate. And I'm finding that it seems, I mean, of course, that there's like a limiting factor to the vipassana and the insight. There's only so deep that I can go without my concentration, being there. It just, it feels, I don't know, if you just hit weird little curves in the road during meditation, your cycle or what have you, where it just feels like the bottom falls out and you're losing everything that you learned and nothing's working. And I kind of had a week like that last week. Where it's just like, it's better now, but the concentration component definitely has been challenging.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely, I mean, the meditation practice, oftentimes it's we're sold that like, oh, we start meditating, life just gets better, which is not true at all. There's definitely rises and falls to it. It's just like, oh, it's going better. Oh, it feels more challenging. Okay, it feels better. It feels challenging. But long range, those dips and crests and valleys do have a general upward trajectory. So the fact that we feel like, oh, my practice is backsliding doesn't necessarily mean that the practice is backsliding. There could be something going on. And maybe you and I, we can talk a little bit one-on-one sometime soon and just see what's going on. Sometimes that the subjective experience of backsliding is actually a sign of progress, oddly enough. But that's absolutely true. It's possible sometimes we kind of work through a karmic knot of something, and then we gain a sense of lucidity, openness, clarity, calm, and concentration. And then when the next theme arises for us to work on, it feels like all of that is gone and we're back at the beginning line. And so we're at the back of the beginning line of whatever it is that might be coming up to be worked on. And I use, that's more in an insight capacity there. And speaking about insight, we often work very collectively with the see, hear, feel practice. I mean, it's fine to just choose to work on themes for a while. Sometimes if you're going into the see, hear, feel practice, just spend a bunch of time just focusing on see and noticing the nuances within that to the exclusion of everything else. Then work on hear to the exclusion of everything else. Then work specifically on feel to the exclusion of everything else. So that's part of the concentration in the Western context of being able to place our attention on a given activity as long as we deem it relevant to the exclusion of what is irrelevant. Yeah? So any practice that we do, you could just focus on a facet of it. And how is it that you can notice some kind of calm and concentration qualities within that, even if it's insight, even if it's metta, even in what have you. And that kind of narrowing of focus and sustained contact and really just examining what's within that relationship hopefully can begin to help. But I mean, if right now, you get in the car and it feels like you can't get out of first or second gear, and counting breath seems to be what feels most appropriate, then definitely get into it. But yeah, if you want to, sometime we can talk a little one-on-one and just see what's going on, and maybe we can adapt a technique to go with it a little better to support it.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, well, speaking of concentration, today, Monday, working with Metta. But last week we were doing a bit of Metta Jhana, and I'd like to continue on with this theme. So Metta Jhana 2, I guess we could say. So kind of dovetailing practices. I always like to say that these specific practices all kind of have a little taste or an element of the other practices within them. So oftentimes metta, in a lot of the contemporary Dharma centers, I hear metta often described as the light and easy practice. Many times I've heard teachers say, oh, just relax. You don't have to get into any specific pose. You can just kind of chill out. We're doing metta, as though it's, I don't know, as though the rules don't apply. I'm not particularly of that ilk. When we look at metta practice in the early suttas, it's usually talked about under two categories. Metta in terms of how it supports sila, our own internal sila, our own internal ethics and integrity. So how is it that we can really kind of look at how that kind of creates more skillful mental states, and as well diminishes the inclination to fall into unwholesome mental states. And then the other category that metta is brought up in is in the context of jhana, actually, with some frequency. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about that there is definitely a lot of historical sutta-based context of dovetailing the metta practice into a deeper concentration practice. So I'll call your attention to this right here. The Samadhi Sutta, immeasurable concentration. Okay, so it's a short one, so I'll go through it all. Here the Buddha is talking about metta practice, or is he talking about the jhana practice? So he's kind of has this overlap. So he's talking about entering into, and it's interesting, he's talking about entering into the jhana via or by cultivating the qualities of metta. So here, wise and mindful, you should develop immeasurable concentration, i.e. concentration based on the measurable goodwill, compassion, appreciation, or equanimity. When wise and mindful, one has developed immeasurable concentration, 5 realizations arise right within oneself. Which 5? So here we have the early suttas. They love their numbers. Oral tradition, those are the mnemonic devices of remembering the qualities. So wise and mindful. So right there, the wisdom component, if one can be essentially aware of awareness, if one can be in this relatively awakened state. Yeah, so sometimes we can talk about cultivating metta. Oh, let's think about this thing, and this thing has a particular positive association, and let's feel that. And it's a way that we're kind of entering in very cognitively, just using concepts and concepts that might evoke an emotion. But here he's kind of talking about, well, can we just contact awareness itself? Can we just kind of rest in awareness itself? And that aspect of just kind of awakened awareness, be mindful. Can we engage in, all right, what is our present time mind-body experience, and be able to adjust that accordingly? The sankharas, the habitual impulses and thoughts and fantasies come in. Can we push those aside or deem them as not relevant, maintaining the stance and open awareness? And develop the immeasurable. So the immeasurables referring to metta, or the four abodes, kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. But he's talking about immeasurable concentration. So utilizing the metta practice as a deep concentration practice. Okay, so 5 realizations arise. What are they? The realization arises right within oneself that this concentration is blissful in the present and will result in bliss in the future. So we're cultivating a bliss. We're cultivating a pleasant abiding within the general metta flavors. Now that could be, the just general sense of kindness, goodwill. Sometimes that can express itself more in the ends of compassion, or more in the ends of an appreciative joy, or more of the flavor of equanimity. But either way, it's a pleasant abiding that's also creating the conditions for it to arise again in the future. We tend to go through life noticing and having the capacity to record negative events much more frequently and effectively than positive ones. An unfortunate byproduct of this is that when we look upon history in general, or our own personal history, we're more inclined to pick out the memories of the negative events, which gives quite a negative view of self and world. So in a way, we're somewhat wired to kind of become depressed as we age and gather more history and have more negative memories. So the more that we can actually train ourselves to cultivate a pleasant abiding, and really what happens is the nervous system adapts into that, and then potentially begins to seek it out in terms of, well, rather than having a negative bias in our perception, as well as where we find our comfort zone, by spending some time cultivating a pleasant abiding, we're recalibrating that scale a little bit so we can even out. So we're creating the conditions for more pleasant abidings in the future. The realization arises right within oneself that concentration is noble and not connected with the baits of the flesh. And this is an interesting one. They're all interesting, but oftentimes when we think of pleasure, what comes to mind? Well, sensory pleasure, be it physical pleasures, lusting pleasures, pleasures of eating, pleasures of what? Well, pleasures based on something that you like, that you see, something that you like, that you hear, that you taste, that you touch. It's all kind of sensory based. It's all kind of, how is it that I can get something out of this world? So it's noble and not connected with the baits of the flesh. So the problem is that if we're exclusively seeking out joy in the phenomenal sensory external world, well, that creates a bit of dependencies on certain activities that can result in us getting out of whack. Yeah, so it's whether our physical sensual cravings are getting out of order in terms of sex, in terms of food, eating, in terms of drink and substance, what have you. It's good to be able to cultivate some time and energy towards, cultivating pleasurable states that are unworldly. Yeah, it's not based on the world of the senses. Being able to cultivate a pleasant abiding just within oneself. It's not connected with the baits of the flesh. Yeah? The realization arises right within oneself that this concentration is not obtained by base people. It's a little judgy, but this concentration is not attained by base people. Again, there's this comparison of the noble ones taking on the noble path. This is subtle work. So by being able to cultivate these particular subtle states of mind, it says something about the practitioner being able to have that as part of their ethics, their value system, to be able to cultivate a joy independent of external conditions. That puts you in a particular category, as opposed to somebody whose joy is completely based on external conditions. The realization rises right within oneself that this concentration is peaceful, exquisite, the acquiring of serenity, the attainment of unity, not kept in place by the fabrications of forceful restraint. So this is interesting. So rather than the Western concept of concentration, of got to crack the books and keep the nose to the grindstone and all those adages that my grade school teachers would throw at us, of concentration being an efforting chore, there's something about, in the Buddhist context, of cultivating of concentration is something that's pleasant. If we can extract the limiting hindrances of the mind body, then the mind comes a bit more towards rest. And then, Nicole, we can look at it that way. What are the present hindrances that are coming up? That could also be adversely influencing the mind's general state of agitation. If we can create the conditions so that the hindrances are less subject to arise, or they arise with less grasping identification or feeling impacted by them, the mind can generally begin to come to a place of rest. And oftentimes that can be a pleasant experience. Or going through the back door, can we cultivate peacefulness, serenity, unity, not kept in place by just kind of effort and restraint. The realization arises right within oneself that I enter into this concentration mindfully, and mindfully I emerge from it. It's not something that we just kind of, we can lapse into states of concentration. We do throughout the day, just as we lapse into states of unawareness as well. But here it is. This is something that we are deliberately doing. We're deliberately cultivating a concentration. And we're deliberately entering in, we're deliberately entering or exiting. So how is it that we can just be aware of the activity, the conditions we're creating for this state, and then the choosing to leave that state to come into just kind of the general wake-a-day world that we abide in. Wise and mindful, you should develop immeasurable concentration. When wise and mindful, one has developed immeasurable concentration, these 5 realizations arise right within oneself. So again, just stating that the metta practice has a long history of being able to be cultivated in the context of metta. I'm sorry, I lost my sense of words. Metta and jhana, they dovetail quite frequently there. So before we go into the guided practice, does anybody have any questions about what I might have just mentioned? Good. Okay. So let's allow everybody to come to a comfortable upright position. Allow yourself to straighten up and settle in. And we'll be cultivating some Metta Jhana today, or attempting to cultivate the conditions to invite that in. We can start off with a simple contact with breath, spending a few minutes cultivating a shamatha. So, anchoring your attention to a part of the body directly involved with breathing, be that the tip of the nose, throat, lungs, belly. Just anchor your attention to that part of the body. So, to the best of your ability, allowing the images, internal talk to be in the background, continually redirecting your attention to the breath, noticing the pleasant qualities in the in breath, the top of the in breath, the out breath, and the base of the out breath. As we contact the breath, can we be aware of this attitude that we have? Can we be inclined to just drop whatever struggle we have going on internally? Get in contact with an intention of kindness. Can we just be kind to the body, however it's showing up today? Can we be kind to the mind, no matter how well or unwell it's behaving today? So regardless of how the body and mind is behaving right now, if there are discomfort, pains in the body, the mind is inclined to be unruly. Can we also just be aware of that attitude that we have towards our experience? Can we just have some compassion towards that which is feeling unwell, that which hurts, that which is unpleasant? And conversely, if anything pleasant arises in the breath, anything pleasant arises in the body as a result of the breath, or any states of ease arise within the mind, can we be aware of this attitude of appreciation, allowing yourself to take in that which is pleasant and appreciate it, enjoy the pleasantness of it, and be willing to let go at any time. Whatever arises in breath, can we just be open, accepting this quality of equanimity? Whatever arises, we allow it. As we're cultivating this breath body awareness, partial awareness just evenly distributed throughout the body, inclining yourself to notice or be more attuned to that which is pleasant, that arises in breath, that arises in body. Can we have that joy, that appreciation of it? Whatever is unpleasant, can we just have that compassion towards it? In either way, we're just directing kindness, openness, and acceptance towards the pleasant or the unpleasant. Towards the unpleasant, it becomes a compassion. Towards the pleasant, it becomes an appreciative joy. So we engage this, just abiding in breath, appreciating the pleasant, compassion towards the unpleasant, overall kindness towards whatever is arising, overall equanimity, acceptance with whatever is arising. This is the immeasurable concentration, yet wise and mindful. Can we be aware of this faculty of awareness itself without getting too complicated? Just that flavor of being awake, aware, the brightness and aliveness of awareness. Really resting into that, wise and mindful, just being aware of whatever arises. So on one hand, there's a bit of efforting in terms of a right effort. If anything unpleasant, unskillful arises, we direct that kindness, acceptance towards it, becomes compassion. Whenever pleasant arises, we direct that kindness, equanimity towards it. It's a bit more of an appreciative joy. So whatever comes into being is related to in that way. And whatever passes away, we just allow it. So we're looking at this relationship, this attitude that we're cultivating towards anything that arises. So whatever is pleasant that arises, you feel that in the body. Allow that, give permission for that to be there. It can be subtle, it could be fleeting, but whatever is the bodily, energetic joy that you detect, whatever energetic component is there, it could be potentially the piti. You can cultivate that, a joyful quality. You notice something pleasant, you recognize it, appreciate it, give it permission to grow if it wishes, which creates another positive moment that you appreciate, which creates another positive moment that you appreciate, creating this positive feedback loop. Not just noticing it in a cold, dry observation, but allowing it to penetrate into you. Your awareness permeates into it. The deriving of sustenance, the deriving of a wholesome nutrient, being sustained by, feeling a sense of contentment, satisfaction. Just enjoying that moment. That's the sukha. Allow that activity to be there should it wish. Okay, good. At ease, everybody. So wise and mindful. Eyes open and acknowledging the external world, but still allowing yourself to be open to what you've been cultivating. So go ahead, mute yourself, manifest. What did you notice? What did you observe? What took place for you this morning?
Yeah. Go ahead. You want to talk, Krishna?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say that when you mentioned the word compassion the first time, I just, like, tears came up. It was like, it was emotionally impactful to just feel. And I think it was something about being directed to yourself. You know, my weekend, there was a lot of family joy, but also a lot of family stress. So, and I was caught up in that. And that's all really, just that it was kind of revealed. There was a lot of emotion there.
Yeah, so there was a lot of emotion that was pent up from the weekend that you might have been carrying. Were you acknowledging it, or was it just when you sat down and the concept or the idea of compassion was introduced that it kind of came up?
Well, I was having a lot of thoughts about it, so it was also helpful before that when you shared about, just if your thoughts and stuff come up, just return to the breath. I found that useful.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of apropos of what Nicole was saying, although I'm not a counter. But just kind of was there. And it felt like it just gave me space to feel it more.
Good. Yeah, there's all these, again, every time that we sit to meditate and we might have an intention to do a particular practice, we might have that intention, but then we have what's authentically happening in our mind-body experiencing. So oftentimes people will take that as a conflict, so that which this potentially could have been maybe for you or somebody else. If it's like, oh, I'm going to try to meditate on pleasurable, the measurable abodes, but my mind is kind of racing with all this conflict and such. So it's the way that they still connect. So just recognizing the unpleasantness of that and just having some compassion, for the mind doing its thing, for the whatever it is feeling, just having that compassion somehow kind of opens the doors and allows these experiences to integrate in a way. Good. I'm glad. Thank you, Rochelle. Okay, Lisa, you had a comment as well.
Yeah. It was funny, when you were going through the blurb before the sit about the 5 realizations. It was really hard for me to comprehend a lot what you were saying, right? So I didn't want to say anything at the end because I know we were like short on time to sit. So at the end, and I taught Nora a lesson about science today. At the end, I was like, but I spent, 45 minutes with you. Like, how don't you remember what we just did? And like, it was kind of like a slap in the face today, because I was like, if someone said, what are the 5 realizations, Lisa? I wouldn't be able to answer that, So I sat with that and I was like, I put a lot of compassion to that for not only me, but to Nora, how, how my expectation was so high, how I didn't understand, because I understand it because it's my level, but this information is not my level. I'm not there yet. A lot of the different vocabulary is really hard sometimes for me to keep up with. So I take notes and I look back on it and stuff like that. But it was just a real eye-opener for me to be like, okay, like touche. So it was interesting. And then at the same time, in the beginning of the sit, I got a package that I was waiting for. So my eyes widened and I was like, go to your breath, go to your breath, go to your breath. So.
The package has your positive reward for sitting.
Yeah. So yeah, it was 2 interesting things.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, especially with teaching the kids it's like we can have like an expectation, and especially a lot of parents feel the sense of, oh, these are the points that our kids should be at, and if they're not at these points, then oh, we're doing something horrible. There could be that pressure that we feel in order to be good parents, but then that's translated into expectation on the child, and child might feel that they're not good enough, they're not getting it, they're not smart enough.
Yeah, I have a lot of apologizing to do after the sit.
Mm.
And it's like, you know, I mean, could have I handled it a lot better? Yes, I may have said some things that were definitely unkind, but it's like, you know, I put all this effort in, like, why aren't you knowing? Could you imagine if you said that? Like, what do you mean? I'm sitting here with you, I'm putting all this effort in. Like, I'd feel like a crumb cake, you know? So
Come on, Lisa, I gave you a little
I
thing and I
know.
highlighted it. What's going
I
on here?
know.
Ain't you getting it in your head?
Exactly. So yeah, I gotta take a step back.
And sometimes in my experience, it's like, you know, for me and for a lot of other people that I speak with, there's this want to know and there's a want to understand. And if we go over something that's like, I don't get it, there's this feeling of like, I don't know, the particular pain, you know, the body suffers because it's distant from comfort. The mind suffers because it's distant from understanding. In a lot of this stuff, especially the vocabulary, it's just about kind of hearing it over and over and over. So if I say a bunch of blah and maybe I might get 5 to 7% of it, it's good.
Yeah.
It's like when you look at the you know, Renaissance paintings, especially a lot of the Northern Renaissance, you know, there's this, they use a lot of medium, a lot of like clear medium within their paint. So when you look at it, it's just, there's this depth of light to it. And that's because of so many layers built upon layers that gives the effect. So each time we go over it, it's just a layer. And maybe a lot of it just washes over and you might not get most of it. You know, that's why I keep going for the solid D minus. So that's in the talking didactic part too. So even if you glean just a little piece of it, the next time we talk about something, it's like, oh, I got this little piece and this little piece, and I see how they connect. And then they'll start to kind of, you know, connect together and form this web of understanding. So it's okay. And at the same time, if I say something and you don't get it, feel free to ask me to repeat myself. I'm always happy to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else before?
I was just going to comment quickly. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, but on math, science, meditation, the terminology thing is so key. And it just reminds me of Shinzen once talking about his struggles to understand math. And that he read and reread and reread this calculus thing. And he finally just said, I think it was calculus, or, you know, you don't really understand it. You just get used to it, the terminology. Yeah. So that kind of applies for this and also the science you're teaching, I think.
I think that I was thinking about, kind of visiting that anecdote. I think he was talking about that in terms of a particular mathematician, Robert Neumann, tripping over the words, but high level math. And this one student came up and he's just like, listen, I'm reading your stuff and I'm just not understanding it. And just like what you said, Rochelle, his response was, you don't understand it. You just get used to it. It's just like, it becomes a map. It becomes a map. You just kind of start to get used to the territory. Okay. Quick checking in. Nicole, how was the concentration? Or how did that go for you?
Thanks, Mike. It actually was okay. Nothing groundbreaking, but better. Having just different objects of focus within that meditation, within that sit, really helps. The compassion element was especially effective, and even within that, I feel like the impermanence was its own object of meditation. Interestingly enough, I was definitely seeing the rise and fall, and still like being able to see the gripping within that, because you know, I want to be inside the positive feedback loop. How do I get to this magical place? Let me be there. And I did get in there, and then I was like, yes, this. And then immediately it's like, nope, switching over to another gear.
Mhm.
It's just like, um, so yeah, along with the compassion elements, the flavors there, that definitely helped me sort of like loosen my grip, and the shamatha as well. I found like I was also cheating, and I was like, let us bring in this beloved pet, kind of,
Hmm.
thing
Yeah.
into it.
No cheating there. That's fine. That's perfect.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
And
So-
yeah, so that was helpful. It was interesting though to have the impermanence as sort of an object of focus. But yeah, thank you. That it was much better.
Well, as they were saying in the sutta, wise and mindful. So, part of that is observing the impermanent aspect, especially that which is you're gripping on. And cool. Thank you for reflecting on the compassion part, because part of me was wondering about that aspect for you. If the concentration has been a little challenging lately, if recognizing what are the hindrances there, and can we just direct the compassion towards the hindrances and whatever is the hurtful aspect that they're generating, and if that might be something that's integrating or resolving for you, that might
It's
be
definitely something that needs to improve. So it was nice to have just like a public service announcement, like every
Yeah.
couple of minutes in this sit. I'm like, yes, that.
when in doubt, compassion.
Yes.
Can you send that link to the thing that you brought up for the?
The link to the sutta?
Yeah, or just tell me what it is.
Sure. Let me put that in the chat for everybody.
Okay.
It is the Samadhi Sutta, immeasurable concentration, Anyutta Nikaya 5.27. So let me put that in the chat. Oops, I'm clicking the wrong things here. I'll put that in the chat. So cut and paste that accordingly.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So last week I said I'll start doing dedication of merit. So we can do that to end the class. So by the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who have come before us on the path, and before those who come after us on the path. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. See you all mañana.
Thanks, everybody.